Welcome to another edition of the MiniPop Jambo with my friend Brian and myself. Got that funk, and others I'm sure will arrive when they finish eating their dinner. That's why it's a dinner club because we're on at dinner time.
This
Anyway,
week's episode subtitled The Yank and the Redcoat.
right. So, Brian, just before we came on live, you and I were discussing the ins and outs. Well, we were preliminarily discussing, Trump and his how should we put it? His inability
Opa.
to see that the whole world doesn't belong to him, and particularly pertaining to the recently confiscated by the feds, all the documents that he had stolen from the government, you know, and you made the point, Brian, that he genuinely believes they're his.
Actually, no. What I was starting to say is I have a hypothesis as to how he might or why he might genuinely think that.
Right.
Yeah. And the hypothesis goes something like this: criminals are dishonest. And I'm going to put this from Trump's internal perspective. Okay.
Sure. Okay.
Criminals are dishonest. I'm open and honest about what I do. Therefore, I cannot be a criminal.
I got yeah, right. So because you're out there saying, "Look what I'm doing, look what I'm doing," it can't be a crime
It can't be a
because
crime.
mm,
Because if it was, then I'd be doing it dishonestly and underhandedly and blah,
the,
blah, blah.
the thing is with the Cheeto commander, he's like he's in such a state of like false. He's basically deluded. I mean, there's no two ways about it. He's he honestly believes the shit. I mean, he's such a narcissist, I think, anyway, that he honestly believes his own bullshit.
Well,
And
here's the thing that it has to be a delusion because the acid test in, well, is there a statute that says this action is illegal? And there are plenty of them. And he's crossed the line on a whole bunch.
well, this is the thing about crossing the line in the broad light of day, like you're mentioning, because I mean, he's basically daring the authorities to do anything about it, and he's been doing that since before he was president. You
Hmm.
know, and there is a case to be made that the reason he hasn't got in trouble is because the system is functioning just the way it's meant to function, i.e., powerful people in our system almost never really get held accountable. Think back to 2008 when any number of dozens of bankers and other financial institution managers, probably should have gone to jail for fraud, but
Yep.
they paid like a $6 billion fine or whatever and managed to do no jail time. You
Yeah,
know,
and still manage to pay themselves huge sorry I fucked up bonuses.
oh, that's just a really uncomfortable fact. We don't need stuff like that around here.
Yeah.
Um,
Here's the other thing with the orange one. Um, he also surrounds himself with what I'm going to call buffer bodies. I mean, his current stuff with the documents in Mar-a-Lago, there's two lawyers that are currently on the hook for you had it all
right.
already. Yeah. So you'll notice in all of in practically every single instance, yeah,
Mm,
since he came to the public forefront in 2015, yeah, in
hmm.
every instance he's had somebody to take the fall for him. Somebody else goes to prison.
Right. And
Yeah. And I
is
think that is a trend that is going to continue. And ultimately, I don't think Congress has a will to put an indelible stain on the office of the presidency, not in
I
the
think we
history
don't have a
books.
choice though, Brian, because basically there are people domestically and internationally looking at what's happening right now and making plans for the future. You know, um,
I agree. He should have the book thrown at him. He should be an example, yeah, of how not to president.
Raven, I know I'm not supposed to mention your appearance, but you look very nice. Thank you very much.
I like people mentioning my appearance.
Never. I didn't know that.
I,
I'm just going to applaud your dress sense.
so, okay, let me just say really quick, because I didn't hear all of it, but what I did hear, I just wanted to say Congress has no voice in whether or not the book
DOJ right now.
at Trump.
Does it not with the January 6th Commission? Does that
No.
not have a voice?
No. Nope. All Congress can do is fact find.
And they can recommend legislation.
I was going to say,
They can recommend legislation and they can recommend the Department of Justice charges, but they can't do anything.
That's right. They don't. They've already spent their wad.
They're right.
Yeah, but
They're a
likewise,
legislative body.
likewise, that they can recommend charges.
Right.
Can they also recommend not to charge?
Yeah, but they won't do that. They will recommend charges.
I mean, they've already basically established that that Trump was one of the prime motivators for the people at January 6th. They've already established that there was multiple prongs to the plot to overthrow the election. It's not just the insurrection. And they've also established that there was literally a unofficial brown shirts, if you will, with the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and some of the 3%ers and others.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I hope they throw the book at him. I mean,
I would prefer they threw the book at him for January 6th than the documents, but the documents might be what get him.
I think they should throw the book at him for all of it. Yeah, and I reckon that now that it's come to light that Bill Barr lied about the Mueller investigation outcome, I think they should throw the book at him for that as well.
Well, and they should throw the book at Bill Barr like 10 times for 10 different things.
Absolutely, they should throw the book at Bill Barr as well. Yeah.
Well, I personally kind of think once they throw the book at Trump, if they throw the book at Trump, then they should start impeaching his Supreme Court nominations.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a good follow-on, yeah.
What's his face? I like beer. Justice I like beer. He needs to be impeached. And Amy Coney Barrett, she needs to be impeached. Neil Gorsuch, who I don't agree with politically, obviously, does seem to bit more on the actual judge kind of a
Right.
He's like the real thing kind of a thing.
Neil Gorsuch is the kind of judge,
political.
Neil Gorsuch is the kind of judge that if Obama was still president and was determined to appease the right, he would have picked someone like Neil Gorsuch.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So
don't like him, but at least he kind of makes sense. But I mean, Justice I like beer. There's no way in hell that he belongs there, especially after his "I like beer" speech as part of his that was nonsense.
Well, and I mean, I don't begrudge the fella for liking beer one little bit, but the thing about that whole process that really bugged me is we now know that the FBI did a sham investigation into his background. Plus, we already knew at the time, and for some reason, it just didn't seem to get the kind of traction you would normally expect. But I mean, someone paid his debts off.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a big deal. You know, someone basically bought a Supreme Court seat, and it doesn't seem to get anywhere near enough discussion. I think I've recently seen, I'm not sure how it's connected, but someone said that there's someone mega billionaire donated $1.6 billion to the RNC, I guess. And how can that even be legal, right? I guess because of Citizens United, but it just blows my mind that you can make that kind of a donation. And
well, I know we have caps on those sort of things here, but over there, I understand it. You don't have any capping. Hi, Peach.
Hello.
You're beautiful.
Right back at you.
Exiled says hi, by the way.
Hello.
Hello.
So anyway, but yeah, so someone told me that or I think I actually read it, that the person who did the $1.6 billion donation is also influential with the Heritage Foundation, who's responsible for suggesting the last 3 justices who've been appointed by Trump. So it all seems kind of like, a fix, if you will.
Sorry, I phased out there. I was on doing something in chat.
Oh, something happening in the chat? What?
I was just saying hi to people. Deep Ashtray said, everybody looks so happy. And I said, we're all sitting on pins. It's all a facade. We're sitting on pins. What kind of pins was the follow-up? It was just sharp bits of metal, just
So,
pins.
not bowling pins. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Actually, while we've got a lull, there was another observation I made in the last month or so, and that's this. It seems to be a crossover between, on the one side, you've got all of this defund the police and complaints about defund the police, and then on the other side, you've got defund the FBI. So basically, we're all talking about defunding the police. It's just at what level?
Actually, but they mean 2 different things, though. So for the left, like defunding the police means stuff like don't give them the kind of money that would be used to militarize police forces, and to instead spend that money on things like social workers and blah 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 blah, and also not sending a cop to every single call, because not everything needs a man with a gun. But when they say defund the FBI, they mean get rid of it. They mean abolish the FBI.
Yeah, I know. I was being overly simplistic. The other thing as well with the FBI, there was another observation I made concerning that raid, and yeah, I noticed there was a lot of phrasing of, look, if they can do this to Trump, just think what they could do to you. And I was thinking, hang on, no, that's the wrong way around. They can already do this to you, so of course they can do it to Trump because he's just a civilian.
Well, I mean, it's also like if they could do this to Trump, they could do it to you, but that's their job.
Yeah.
So I would hope they could, because it's their job,
right?
What is the point of having law enforcement if they can't enforce the laws?
Law.
Well, I mean, I just think it's farcical that anybody tries to everyman Trump. I mean, Trump is the absolute antithesis of everyman. Do you know what I mean? He's a spoiled
rich.
brat, always has been.
He's Richie Rich that doesn't need to draw a pension. You remember that cartoon, Paul? Richie Rich?
Sure, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I swear that kid was modeled on Trump.
Oh, that's a horrifying thought. Yeah, I think Macaulay Culkin played Richie Rich in the movie.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. Yeah, but there you go. There's a link between Macaulay Culkin and Trump right there with the Home Alone movies.
Oh, right. There you go. Yeah.
There you go. Proven.
The thing about that blew me away about the discourse when they a couple weeks ago now, I guess, when they were saying defund the FBI. I mean, we literally went from Trump announcing that he had his house searched by the FBI. 48 hours later, the entire right wing is chiming in, defund the FBI. I mean, that's going from zero to fucking Aida. Do you know what I mean? What do you think, Peach?
Yeah, bring us some sanity, please.
What about the right's hypocrisy regarding the FBI?
That would be one place to start. But I mean, also just like this, I mean, like Raven said, they want to really abolish the FBI. It's not about reform. It's and then that begs the question, doesn't it? Why? And why did everybody chime in on that level? I mean, is the brainwashing that deep?
Well, yes, because they don't understand the function of the FBI.
Right.
They don't understand that it's the FBI that investigates, the child sex trafficking that they claim to care so much about.
Right.
When it crosses state lines.
Good point.
So yeah, when they realize that FBI is not uh, is not an arm of the Republican Party, then yeah, they find they have no use for it.
Which is hilarious to me because Deep Ashtray just commented most FBI agents are conservative Republicans. I don't know if that's factually correct or not, but I do know it's a true thing to say that every FBI director has been a Republican. I think going back to at least Reagan. I can't remember a time when we've had a nonpartisan or Democrat FBI director.
Well, I
Is that
mean,
true
it's
under
true to
Biden's
say-
administration?
yeah, because Comey was during the Obama administration was Comey, at least
Yeah.
a part of it,
He's Republican.
and he's a Republican. So I mean, it would be accurate to say that FBI, military in general, the police force, those kinds of occupations, those kinds of jobs attract people who are right-wing Republicans.
Do you think that's because it's a function of conservatism?
No.
No, I
No.
mean, because I would have thought the military is kind of like the strong arm of keeping things as they are.
Well, not in the U.S. I mean, because the military is not supposed to be used domestically. There are laws against that.
That's right. Yeah, you've got your state troopers, haven't you, for that?
So I it's about power, I think, and I think people who are on the right wing, men, specifically, it's about power. So any occupation that's going to give them a position of authority, they kind of tend to gravitate to. It's also about being in control at a time when everybody's afraid of the other.
Yes, and the other being defined as whatever's politically expedient at the time.
Yeah, I mean, and they seem to like pick and choose depending on what's going on the internet these days. I mean,
Jews will not replace us.
Yeah.
What shoes?
Jews.
Sorry, I thought you'd got some nice high-tech shoes or something.
No, they won't replace us anyway.
Depends if they've got AI in them, they might.
No. That would be a cheap replacement.
Do you mean the shoes or the AI? Yeah, changing the subject again. Didn't Marjorie Taylor Greene engage in cancel culture regards Facebook this week?
Oh, I think that's Boebert, but
Oh, was that Boebert?
I think
Sorry.
it's Boebert. They're hard to tell apart in terms of the things that come out of their mouth, but obviously they look completely different. But yeah, I think it was Lauren Boebert who basically wants to shut down Facebook. Yeah, and shutting down Facebook isn't. I guess because it's they're too liberal. They're too anti-Republican, I guess, on Facebook, which is hilarious.
Too eager to stamp down on election lies, I guess.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong, Brian. Facebook has way too much influence over not just America's, but a lot of different countries' social and political zeitgeist. Whether we like it or not, it's there. And I think whether we like it or not is the current de facto situation. But we don't have to put up with the way it is. I'm not exactly sure how to cure the problems that Facebook creates without actually eliminating Facebook, because I don't really advocate that. But I just think they have way too much power, and we don't vote for them. And when people have that kind of power, but you don't vote for them, who's putting them in charge? The people with the money, basically, the ones who want to make the profit. And profit is not one thing that D.H. Lawrence once said, which I understand. I disagree with the aristocracy part, but he once said that he preferred an aristocracy to capitalism because the aristocracy has to care about the little people, whereas in capitalism you reward greed. Obviously, I paraphrase that, but I mean, like the principle of that's right. Capitalism rewards one of the darkest impulses in human nature. You know, greed, exploitation. You know, we could design a system that rewarded different things and still have a functioning system. That's my opinion. It's never been tried, so how the fuck would I know, right? But
Speaking of the C word, as you brought it up, there's been various murmurings in UK politics that capitalism is starting its death throes because it's overstretched itself and it's broken. Do you think that's true?
That would mean that Karl Marx was right. Because Karl Marx said that the seeds of capitalism's destruction are built within the system itself.
What do you think? Do you think, as an observation, it's true? Do you think capitalism is starting to break down? I mean, we've got to a point whereby the only way that you can actually squeeze more profit for the shareholder dividends is to actually cut back on some of your overheads, and that means getting rid of regulations, and we've seen political moves to do that on both sides of the pond. Yeah So something is going to have to give at some point, surely.
Well, I mean, here in the States, there's a couple of things that are happening. There's like the quiet quitting, which is something I recommend. And there is also a labor shortage that doesn't really exist. It's just that people aren't willing to work for low wages anymore.
There you go. There's one crap.
It's causing a lot of problems. And if a lot of these big companies are not willing to pay more, they're going to continue to have problems. So.
Yeah, I was looking back the other day, and I forget who it was, but somebody made the odds. Excuse me.
Have another cigarette there, bro.
Raven, how long has it been now?
In November, it'll be 2 years.
Awesome.
But I used to do that. Peach remembers.
Yep. I remember how you used to wake up hacking your guts out.
There we go. Sorry about that. But yes, you're right. Thank you. That's why it's over there now. What was I saying?
I don't know.
You were going to make a remark about capitalism. I think that was where we are.
Yeah, it'll have to come back to me.
Well, that's fine. I'll jump in then. I mean, I think the thing is the status quo as it is at the moment, I think, is an unsustainable form of capitalism. But in my lifetime, it has not always been thus. I'm not saying capitalism has always been healthy or the best way to necessarily organize a society, but it hasn't necessarily been as rapacious as it has been, let's say, the last 20 or so years.
Yeah, that reminded me of what I was going to say. Looking back at the Reagan era and the Thatcher era, and in terms of taxes paid, corporate taxes were probably at their highest in the 20th century, I believe it was. Certainly a damn sight higher than they are now. And that was one of the economically most prosperous eras, apparently. Now, I don't know how valid that analysis is, but looking back over my lifetime, I can see some merit to it, because certainly during the Thatcher years, everybody was all about, up and at it, go and get them, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, exactly. In fact, we had that term, god awful term, yuppie.
Right. We had
young,
that.
Upwardly mobile. Yuppie. I don't know where the M disappeared to, but
yeah, yuppie, young, upwardly mobile professional.
Yep. Yes, yum. Yum.
Yumpy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. The,
Right,
the
yeah.
greed is good culture.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would like to discuss this comment from Deep Ashtray. In 50 to 75 years, feudalism will be in full vogue. Do you think that we're headed toward a new feudalism if capitalism fails?
I think there's a good possibility because it'll all have to start with local produce, local distribution, stuff like that. You know, farmers markets, local communities pulling together.
Hmm.
That's the only way I can see any way out of a total financial collapse.
Hmm. Pete, you had a skeptical expression when I said about will there be a new feudalism if capitalism fails?
No, it wasn't pertaining to that.
Oh, okay, right, okay, fair enough. Yeah. Green Machine rather makes a point here. Capitalism was less rapacious when we lacked the technology to make it so. I don't think that gets very much discussion. You know, how has technology impacted the social order, whether that's via capitalism or also just, you know, I mean, we never really even decided if TV was a good thing, and then the internet came along. You know what I mean? And these things have tentacles reaching deep into all parts of culture. You know.
Vegas asks a good question. What he gets confused by is everyone's critique of capitalism. What I get is who here exactly isn't a capitalist? Well, I'm not entirely a capitalist.
I personally am not against a mercantile society where people, you know, buy and sell things, and I'm not against the concept of profit per se, although I understand that profit builds in exploitation. We can have that discussion, but that's a pretty long discussion. But my whole thing is there, and we talked about this before, but I don't know if Vegas was around back then. But I mean, my whole thing is there's certain things that I think are fine for capitalists philosophy in certain parts of society that should not be. Like the argument in America, for example, about universal health care is a really good one. It's pitched as if, why should people get free health care, right? Why should I pay for someone else's health care? It's the same reason you pay for someone else's roads, or you pay for someone else's school, or you pay for someone else's military complex. You know, we all pitch into the same bucket that pays for all the stuff. And my attitude is something like healthcare, something like electricity, which we all depend on. So the distribution of the creation and distribution of electricity, healthcare, policing, emergency services in general, education, that stuff all should be considered infrastructure and beyond the scope of a profit motive.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to pay the fire department to come and put my fire out. You know, when my house is on fire, I don't want to have to pay to get the police to investigate the murder of my kid, right? I wouldn't want, you know, those things should never be privatized. And we have allowed, through basically just the evolution of how things have worked, we've allowed our culture to skip what the rest of the world's been doing for more than 50 years for the most part, which is universal health care of some kind. And because they do see it as infrastructure in those cultures, whereas we don't. We see it as a commodity for, you know, for purchase, you know.
Yeah, we've just put the final nails in our universal healthcare, more or less.
Oh God, don't tell me that.
Yeah, everything is more or less privatized now. The only thing that isn't privatized,
the doctors and nurses themselves.
No, they are. That a lot of those are private contractors now. Right. The only thing that isn't is the health insurance side of things. We still just pay national insurance, and that covers us.
Right.
So that hasn't been privatized yet. When that goes, and we have to, I mean, we've got voluntary private health insurance.
Sure.
But when that becomes a mandatory thing, then yeah, we're totally fucked health wise. But in addition to what you laid out there, I would probably add public transport as well,
And water. I should have put water in
and
there too.
water. Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with public transport. I mean, there's certain things that, everybody needs, but I think are okay for like capitalist purposes, like for food, for example. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
People
food can be
don't
open
like
to
trading
market
food since
forces.
time out of mind. I think that's a good one, but
Yeah. Luxury goods, cars,
sure.
watches, phones, all of
Consumables,
that stuff.
basically, yeah.
Yeah, consumables. Yeah, that's perfect fodder for capitalism.
Right.
But the what's the water situation here? Expensive. One of the things that Exiled has commented on recently is how much she took the free availability of water for granted until she came over here. And it's something that I did notice in my time over there. It's like, yeah, water, you just stick on a hose, stick on a tap, and it's just there.
Right. Well, I'm just going to digress really quickly over to the. I'm just going to put it up here, Brian, so we can discuss it. Would you want to build universal health care as socialism? That's the only part of that comment I need to address right now, but I'm going to leave it there for a second. No, I personally would not call that socialism. You see, and this is why the conversation has been hijacked by the right, because the right calls virtually anything that benefits people socialist. And that's even including things like Social Security, and it's even got the word social right in it. But I mean, like, the bottom line is that socialism, as far as my understanding of the term goes, is more about the workers owning the means of production, which and I don't think having universal health care fits that description. I don't think having public ownership of utilities fits that description. Not personally me, but some people would say that's socialist. I personally don't see it that way. It's just a different way of running your capitalist society. You're taking certain profit avenues out of the equation because profit in those places actually hurts people instead of benefiting them. You could say, well, it benefits the shareholders. Yeah, but that's the precious few. And we should be trying to create a society where everybody can prosper, and some can prosper more than others, but everybody can prosper.
I would agree with you on that. These things are. I wouldn't actually consider them socialism either. But for the sake of the discussion, I am willing to adopt that definition because, strictly speaking, yes, it's centrally controlled, and it's kept affordable and accessible to everybody. So by that definition, yeah, I suppose very loosely, yes, but not really.
The thing about fooling the socialism phobic people is they literally think of everything. People on the right call everything communist now, and then they turn back at people like me and say, well, you call everything fascist. And it's like, well, I don't even know how, really. That is part of the problem, I guess, with the overuse of hyperbole on the internet in general.
Yeah, it has become hyperbolic, a lot of those terms, sadly.
Are you guys just keeping your mics off because the kids are making too much noises? Okay, that's what's going on.
So as far as all like socialism, and so what? What if it was? Like the problem with socialism in the U.S. has nothing to do with socialism. It has everything to do with the painting socialism as a great evil. That anything that is even remotely even associated with it must be stamped out at all costs. And like you had already mentioned, like Social Security is something that the right has been attacking since it was invented. Ronald Reagan used to have TV commercials about it. About the great evil of Social Security that's coming. And then I think while he was president, didn't he save the entire Social Security system? He pulled it out of the gutter. So
To be fair, he needed to, otherwise you would have had a major social crisis.
Well, yeah, but I
He
mean,
was.
this was a guy who was saying that we should get rid of it even before it was really a thing that was popular. It was somebody who was, you know, spent a lot of time, many years before he was even like a serious politician, working against the idea completely because it was just, you know, that's what the other people do. That's not America.
And then he learned what it actually is.
I don't think he ever learned anything. I mean, you know, like most politicians, it was just like, what's going to keep me in office or it's going to keep me popular. So it didn't really matter what reality is. That's the entire right wing. Facts be damned.
It's a good job Joe isn't here, because he'd jump all up and down on me for what I'm about to say. Because it's only a left-right thing from the United States perspective. When it comes to the US struggles with socialism, because the rest of the world seems to be able to function with part capitalism, part socialism, using US definitions, and seems to function and prosper just fine.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that.
Good.
Because when Tony Blair was leading the Labor Party, before they even got into fucking government, they ditched Clause 4, which basically,
Blair was about as conservative as you're ever likely to get in a Labour government.
You won't get any argument from me on that one. And
he out-Toryed the Tory before him.
Well, I mean, the first Labour term in the 90s, late 90s was, I thought, amazing. I actually never seen anything like it in my life, Brian. It's the first time in my life that the leadership of government changed, and I could actually see in society a change happen as a result of the change of government. I never saw that in my life. I was like, hang on a minute. You mean, within, and in my life directly changed because I was a single parent of 2 tiny kids at the time. Right. Yeah. So like, the conservative government had both barrels aimed at me because I was a single parent on benefits who was foreign. 3 barrels pointed at me. Right.
Yeah, but then you see Blair went and undid all of that by giving the keys to the economy to the Bank of England.
Well, you don't even want to get me started. But I mean, I thought in the first Labor term of the 3 they had, we used to actually call him Uncle Tony in my house. That's how fond I was of Blair. And then after September 11th happened, and Tony Blair seemed to just coincidentally round about that time sell his soul. And it was already sold. I realized that, but I was duped for the first 4 years, I think. And after that, I saw his true colors.
Yeah. Well, I wrote him several scathing letters during the 90s about what he was doing to our economy. Just didn't listen.
Speaking of writing letters to your, in this case, the Prime Minister, my son lives in Dorset. He has met his MP on 3 separate occasions and had arguments to his face. He's also written the guy and written other MPs, I don't know how many times. And he's like, Dad, democracy is broken. I'm like, son, just because they're not doing what you're asking them to doesn't mean democracy is broken. But I mean, at least he's doing the thing. I think if everybody did the thing and we all actually participated like that and did write our congressperson or our, in your case, MP, and didn't let up and never shut up about it. I mean, look at what happened when Trump was first president and they were going to try to do away with Obamacare, and hundreds of thousands of people wrote their senators and Congress people saying, not on my watch, no. And the Republicans couldn't actually get away with overturning it, even though that's one of the things they ran on.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do have a mechanism here whereby if a petition gets so many signatures, then it has to be debated in the House of Commons. And I think what your son may be commenting on, because I've seen this a lot, especially in the last 20 years, since Blair, as it happens. When you write to them, instead of acknowledging what you've actually written to them about, all they will do is just regurgitate the current government position on something.
Pretty much, they've got a set of form letters. I mean, my son's got a few of them now. You can see that it's a form letter. That's just it's the regurgitation. This is what you get if you get an opposing view to this thing. You send this letter, you know.
Yeah, and it's always just a restatement of the thing that you've written to them about.
Yeah, exactly.
And
telling them
like,
why you disagree with it, and they don't engage with you at all.
They just it's just like, yeah, well, this is how it is.
Right.
It's like, yeah, but this is why that's wrong.
Yeah.
This is why that doesn't work.
Yeah, that's exactly what he was saying, and that's exactly why he says it's broken, because he says basically even if you try to participate, they won't let you. There's no engagement.
Right.
You know?
The only way that you can actually do it, as I say, is to get enough signatures on a petition, or to actually run for office yourself. And the thing is, if you run for office yourself, then you end up being just as big a liar as the people you're trying to do something about.
Well, I hope that's not true. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people who run for politics start off with the best of intentions, and then the deeper they get into it, the more they get chewed up by the machine.
Yeah.
But I don't really know how true that is, but that's how it sort of looks sometimes.
That was what I was trying to say. But
yeah. I just want to bring this comment up by Deep Ashtray. The issue of Social Security is much like abortion. The GOP would be totally lost and bewildered if they actually went so far as to eliminate it. They lost a major rallying cry with abortion. I think there's some merit to that insofar as if they actually did get rid of Social Security, that would affect literally every single American. And I don't think I can't see it benefiting enough Americans in any tangible way to where they could get away with it without ruining the party, you know. But they don't seem too overly concerned about ruining their party, you know.
Speaking of the Roe v. Wade abortion thing, I'm not sure if it's just that I'm seeing the wrong news outlets or I'm not seeing enough of the right ones or whatever it is. But from what I'm seeing, in the states where the abortion issue has been on the ballot, it seems to be that the public consensus in those elections is actually upholding abortion rights. Am I observing that correctly, or am I? Okay, so in the long run, it could well be that they're putting it back to the states, which, as I believe we discussed last week, was actually constitutionally accurate. It could well
yes and no.
be.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because not going to rehash that conversation, but the fact that you're now getting these things actually enshrined in state law, doesn't that make it harder for the anti-abortion people to actually get traction at a federal level?
You're off mic, Rave.
Not really, because all they have to do is enact a federal ban, which is what they're trying to do.
Right.
They can make it illegal for the state.
Overturning Roe v. Wade was putting it back to the states.
But that's what they said. That's what they said when they were trying to get Roe appealed, overturned. Their argument was that it was a states issue and they wanted to send it back to the states. But the day that it was overturned, that very day, then they came out and said, now we're working towards a national ban.
Oh, I missed that.
So that was a smokescreen.
Yeah, and the thing about turning it back to the states is there seems to be, and maybe I'm too cynical, but there seems to be like a competition about which state can be the most draconian towards women's rights when it comes to the abortion issue. There's some states, like Texas, I believe, if a doctor performs an abortion, he's liable for like $100,000 fine and life in prison, I think. And that's even, and I hate this when people say, even for rape and incest. Yeah, I mean, because anybody should be able to get an abortion, rape, incest, consensual sex, whatever, doesn't matter. That's my opinion. But when it comes to the rape issue in Texas, if you rape someone, you're going to do 5 years, maybe if you get convicted, and that's like 2% of people get convicted. So you might do 5 years. If you perform an abortion on a child who got raped, you're going to go to jail for the rest of your life if you get convicted for that. So they're actually sentencing people for abortions more than for crimes such as rape. And to me, that's obscene.
I agree. It is obscene. I'm just responding to Vegas, who's just put up a platform that I would vote for.
Which one?
Mandatory joints and
Oh, that
puppies.
one.
Fix the country in a week. Yeah, speaking of which, I'm surprised that nobody's floated the idea of legalizing weed in this country to try and fix some of our Brexit problems.
It's shocking to me that it hasn't been like one of the first things that they suggested. Now that you're not part of the, it's shocking. I actually can't believe it's still the situation in Britain, to be honest, and for that matter, in the States here in America, where it's not legal. It's because it's legal in one way or another in 35 out of the 50 states.
Yeah, and they're all falling like dominoes.
And well, I mean, it's kind of farcical to have a federal prohibition when 35 states have it legal one way or the other.
Right.
So
leave it to the states. Okay.
But at the end of the day, the federal government can still send the FBI into any one of these states and just start basically knocking over these places and taking all the money.
What's it going to do in Colorado? Tear down all the schools that have been built?
Yeah, right. I mean, in California, when it was first legalized, that it was an issue that they had, that the FBI was constantly going into the stores, the pot shops, and confiscating all the money because it was all gained illegally.
Right. Yeah. That was when that was happening back when it was only medically legal. Now it's recreationally legal, and I think they've backed off as far as that goes. But that was definitely happening when it was first medically legal over here. Yeah.
I mean, it's against the law to open up a bank account if the money that you're depositing into it is gained illegally. So all the money that the shops made had to stay in the store because they couldn't deposit it anywhere. They couldn't go anywhere with it. It was a cash business.
Yeah, in Colorado, you can't use a bank card or a credit card to buy grass, for example.
New York City, you can. I don't know about New Jersey, but I know in New York City,
the banks won't do it, because it's like you say, it's an illegal trade, and so they don't want anything to do with it.
That's right. Colorado's cash only, isn't it?
It was when I lived there. It was for sure. Yeah, at least everywhere I went. You want to hear a funny? You want to hear a funny fact about Boulder, where I lived in Colorado? And this might not actually be a fact, but you can barely tell the difference between what I'm about to say and a fact, because it seems to me that Boulder has more dispensaries than churches, right? And that's a ratio that I think we could, if we repeated that across the country, things would get a lot better pretty quick.
How many pubs or drinking establishments are there?
What, in Boulder?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have a clue. I didn't spend enough time in town. I was up on the mountain.
Because that would be an interesting one to ratio in as well. One of the little factoids about Brighton that I used to love when I lived down there was that there was a pub for every single day of the year. So you could go to a different pub every single day of the year and not go in the same pub twice.
How could you resist doing that all through the whole year? I mean, you just have to make it a thing.
Yeah, but I mean, once you've lived there for 20 years, it gets a bit lame.
Right. And they can't all get good pubs anyway, right? Some of them have to suck.
It was something that we did try on a couple of occasions.
Mm.
That's a lot of pubs in one town. You know Brighton, don't you, Paul? You've been there, haven't you?
I have visited Brighton twice, and I once had a blind date in Brighton, and that did not go very well. And, and then I visited Brighton to watch my kids run in the Brighton Marathon.
Oh yeah, Brighton Marathon. That's a day and a half.
Yeah. Brighton is a small city, Green Machine. I'm not sure what you could compare it to. states wise, because British towns and cities are different to America. I mean, everything's tight in Britain. Things are tight, and then there's a bunch of open space. Whereas, like, say, for example, here in California, things are spaced out and we're not all living right up next to each other and everything like that, you know? But in Britain, most places anyway, in Britain, things are tight. Things, little conurbations are tight, you know? Have I stressed the tightness?
I can give you the population. Population of Brighton is 277,000.
Right. So there's a pub for every 750 people. That's a pretty good ratio.
Actually, that's Brighton and Hove together. So half of that for Brighton. And basically, Brighton and Hove is London by the sea, essentially.
Right. Well, I mean, Brighton's a pretty hip town. I mean, to the closest American equivalent I could come up with, I suppose, would be Berkeley in California. Trendy university town, full of liberal, open-minded people. That's how I would describe Brighton anyway, and definitely Berkeley too.
Yeah, it was the birthplace of British pride.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And it was known through the 70s and 80s as the pride capital of Britain. Sorry, the gay capital of Britain.
Right.
So, yeah. Fun town.
Yeah. Yeah, I went there to watch my kids do the marathon, right? And here's the thing. My daughter used to do marathons for charity, like pretty frequently. She'd either do marathons or half marathons. And my son said to her, and she'd go work out at the gym 5 days a week, right? And she'd jog 3 or 4 or 5 nights a week as well. So she trained pretty hard for her marathons. My son didn't train at all back then. And he said, "Hey, you want me to come run with you in the marathon?" And she's like, "Yeah." didn't think he could do it. Anyway, I went to Brighton to watch them, and so because I didn't know my way around Brighton, my son came to meet me, and then we met up with his sister at mile marker 6, and then he took off with her from mile marker 6. So that boy ran 20 miles just so she didn't have to be alone.
Good lad.
That's brothers and sisters,
Oh,
man.
yeah,
I love that shit about my kids, man. I think it was great. Plus, he never had no training. He just took off and started running, man. I mean, that's up here. That's up here, because if you don't train, you're gonna fail normally. But if you push yourself, I guess you can still do it. I couldn't run 20 miles to save my life.
It also helps to be young.
I suppose that's true for sure. Yeah.
Not even when I was young.
Yeah, well, that's probably true for me too. I don't know.
I know that's a fact because I once collapsed on a running track after 3 miles.
When's the last time you gave yourself some hardcore physical exertion?
Me? Oh.
Everybody, I want to go around the clock. We'll start with you, Brian.
Probably late 80s, because
Okay.
I hit disability in the 90s.
Right. What about you, Raven?
Actually, hang on. Having said that, when I was in a wheelchair, I did do some rock climbing one summer.
Wow. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. It was mainly me clinging to a rock while somebody was hauling me up on a string, but it felt like rock climbing to me.
What about you, Raven?
Like hardcore, like real kind of physical.
Even if it's just actually running, like with abandon, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I mowed the lawn today. And that was a bitch.
Okay.
That counts.
I'm sorry.
I mean, other than that, and that kind of a thing, I don't think there's been anything since I left the service.
Right. How about you, Peach?
I'd say it's been a few years.
Yeah.
For a while, I was pretty good with working out every day or almost every day, and then of course I always fall off the wagon.
Yeah, I can't even get on that wagon. I've not anywhere near the discipline. I recently, when I first came out here to California to look after my mom, I was a bit depressed because obviously I just got out of a relationship at the same time. And so I know you'll find this hard to believe, but I got fat. And I didn't even notice it was happening. And then I looked down one day and I noticed, and my vanity kicked in hard like that. And so I started walking and I stopped munching so much damn junk food, and I actually managed to do it. But so now I'm basically hiking 35 miles a week. Yay. That's great. And I didn't, if you said to me a year ago, Paul, you'll be hiking 30 miles a week or whatever, I'd be like, no. But it's just hiking. And part of the reason I'm not jogging or doing anything more strenuous is because the strenuous part. And I'm just too damn lazy. I'm also a little bit worried about my knees, you know. Who's not? Marcus is not buying what? What are you not buying, Marcus? Be more specific. I said a lot of things. Any one of them might be disproved.
If you put on all that weight, like you were saying, you put on weight. If you had worn like a white suit with a black shirt, you could be like Wilson Fisk.
Okay. Well, I had a terrible spare tire that was like totally unacceptable. Like I say, my vanity, man. And you know, considering this face, you think, Paul, how can you still be vain? But you know, it's just built in.
My nickname, or one of my nicknames when I was at high school, was Spud, or Potato, because that was kind of the shape that I was. At 16, I weighed 16 stone. How much is that in pounds? Somebody worked
Like
that out.
168.
168.
Mm.
Yeah.
No, 164. Sorry. Yeah, that's right.
And yeah, that was Pillsbury Doughboy. That was another one of my nicknames. And I left high school, and I figured I needed to do something about that if I was ever going to get laid. So, I did do something about it, and I got myself down to 9 stone. And then I started working out with weights, and I hit those weights pretty hard till I was about 25. And it paid off. It paid off.
Mm. Yes.
I got paid at 24. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, the most I ever weighed in my life was 200 pounds. And considering that when I first grew to this height, I weighed 121 pounds. So now I weigh about 175 or 180. And if you take like 50 pounds off this, there's nothing left, you know? So, I mean, I was like David Bowie skinny back in the day, you know, ridic skinny, like stupid.
We have a correction. 16 stone is 224 pounds.
Do you say 16 stone?
Yes.
Oh, I completely miscalculated.
Yeah.
Like, wow, 224
pounds.
I think I was multiplying 12s. I was having 12s in my head for stones. That's how long I've been gone for.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
I forgot how much a stone was.
Yeah. 14
wow.
to a stone.
I must have gone native to America again. Anyway.
Yeah. These days I'm 13 stone, and I've got a beer gut, even though I don't drink beer. So I think that's just it's just the what is it? Silverback paunch.
Yeah.
Not going to talk about your weight issues, or is that not your favorite subject?
Weight issues? I don't care.
So most of my adult life, I was 135 pounds. I
And how
was
tall are you, Raven?
5'10" and a half,
Okay.
just under 6 feet tall.
Slender. That's pretty slender, yeah.
So now I'm topping out at about 200. There goes Paul. So I'm about 200 pounds now, and yeah, that sucks. It sucks, and it's mostly like right in here. So
Yeah, but you're tall, so
yeah, no, I have a spare
Me-
tire.
I mean, I'm 5'8" now, but back then I was not quite 5'8" yet because I did a little final spurt in my late teens. So yeah, I really was round at 220 pounds.
Yeah, no, I've got like a muffin top, and it's bad. It's all terrible. So it is what it is.
What's your bone density?
I'm sorry.
Bone density,
Oh, I don't know.
because
I think our scale tells you that.
I think it does too. Yeah, I don't
Check your app when you get a chance.
know.
yeah, because a lot of the time, especially if you've got a lot, if you're sort of tall, large framed, a lot of the time it's bone density because it's a bigger bone. It needs to be denser.
Bone mass,
Yes.
Oh.
Bone.
7.8%.
Okay, now to figure out what that means. Okay, bone mass. So what's that? Bone mass index, I guess.
8 pounds.
Okay, it says bone density between 1 and 2.5. That's considered low bone mass.
Yeah, I'm right on the border of average and above average.
Okay, so heavy bones doesn't help.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Berlin Wall's falling again.
So I mean, like for me, and it is a topic that I've actually discussed quite a bit, and it doesn't make me happy. So it's something I talk about that I don't like talking about.
Oh,
But I mean, for me, one of the issues is it doesn't look feminine, and part of me says I really shouldn't give a shit. I am who I am, and I'm doing that only so other people accept me for who I am. But then, like there's another part of me that's like, yeah, but still, I want to look a certain way, regardless of what other people say or think. I still want to look a certain way. So, although I know I shouldn't give a shit, I do. I just do.
And how do you balance that in your mind, Raven? I mean, do you argue with yourself about it, or do you kind of know what you want, but
Well, yeah, like all of the above. I mean, like I know what I want, and I have a pretty decent idea how to get there. At the same time, it's just like I know that obsessing over it is unhealthy.
Sure.
I know that what I'm trying to do is trying to force myself to fit into societal demands on what women should look like. Um, it just isn't healthy, and I really shouldn't care, but I do.
yeah. Well, that's how all women are.
Does recognizing yourself in the mirror, is there an element of that to it? Because I know the reason I phrase it that way is because at the moment when I look at myself in the mirror, because since I did the solidarity haircut and the COVID mask shave and all of that, I have not recognized myself in the mirror for a while.
So for like, I can't, I cannot, and I won't speak for like all trans women with this, but I will
No,
say,
I'm just asking you.
what I will say for me, there was a point when I was shaving one day before I started to like really like get heavily into like the physical changes, and I was shaving in the mirror one day, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw me. I saw Raven. So while I was still going by Rob mostly, because it was kind of like a slower kind of like a social transition than I would have liked, but whatever. It is what it is. It's easier to go slower, I guess. But while I was shaving, it was just like, I had to stop because it was like, there she is. There she is.
Here she is.
So you know what I mean by recognizing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
Was that a bit of a moment for you, Raven?
it was. It was. I got Peach remembers. I got really excited. I was just like, there she is. I seen her.
That's great.
Sorry,
Sorry, were you
I've seen her and she's beautiful.
Yeah, see, I have the opposite problem. I look and I see me, and it's like, oh, it's still there.
I don't know that I ever had body dysmorphia as such, because I certainly never had that kind of a diagnosis. But I know that when I was about 125 and super skinny, I fucking hated looking at myself in the mirror. I hated it. Like, I just couldn't stand it. I could comb my hair and get the fuck out. That's about it,
I was like that with a potato.
The funny thing is, actually, if I'm in the bathroom mirror, I know it gets tilted just the right way. I look and I'm like, for 50, 53 plus, almost 54-year-old guy, not too bad. And then I get in the live stream and I'm like,
Oh,
So that's what
Yeah,
I look
it's
like.
camera, Joe. Camera always makes you look worse than you actually are.
Or if I see pictures and I'm really like, oh God.
I'm going to put this up because I think it's a genuine question.
What's that?
I'm going to put this up because I think it's a genuine question from our friend Vegas here. Is body dysmorphia the same as gender dysphoria? Please explain.
No. So Vegas knows this. Vegas, Vegas, is this okay what I'm about to say? And you know what I'm about to say.
You have to wait a minute because
Yeah, I'll give it. So gender dysphoria is very simply kind of like hating yourself because of your gender, or your gender doesn't really match what you feel. Body dysmorphia is more of I hate my body because it doesn't look like what I want it to look like, or whatever. So I think they're related, and often for trans women they're often linked, but it's not the same thing. And Vegas recently came out as trans. I believe the name she's going to go with is Autumn, and she's gone really far in a short time, and we'll be starting HRT on Tuesday, and I'm very proud of her and happy for her. And yeah, and oh my God, she has so much hair.
you got a thumbs up from the chat, by the way.
Hey, Raven.
Do eat.
To make that announcement as you just did, you seemed a little bit proud and excited. Is that a fair assessment?
I am. I'm very excited for it because it's so there's getting to know yourself after years and years and years for myself and for Autumn. You're not really allowed to do, but when you start to do it, it's a very private thing. It's something you do inside your own head, and you examine all kinds of possible futures and how you would move through the world if you only could, kind of a thing. And that, in my opinion, although I think most trans women go through that, I think it's sad and lonely. And then the process of actually taking those steps is scary and public. And to make the leap from one to the next takes a lot.
I'll bet.
And especially, when you're living as a man, you are outwardly presenting as a man, and you are publicly identifying as a man with a family. to do things and to say things that are going to have permanent effects and a permanent impact on that assumed reality.
Right.
I got to tell you, it takes a lot more strength and a lot more courage than you can possibly know. And I know for me, where I am, or at least where I was in the world 2 years ago, I had a rock solid support network that I am very fortunate to have. This beautiful young woman on the stream here is my rock. I know that Autumn and her life and where she was, she doesn't have the same kind of network that I do. And so I'm very proud of her to make that leap anyway, not knowing where she was going to land. So
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Peach is the awesome.
Well, yeah, I'd just like to congratulate Autumn for finding herself. Yeah, if that's right for you, then yeah, go for it. I hope it all works out. But on that note, I'm gonna have to bid you all a fond farewell and bow out. It's too crowded in here now. It's all anti OCD.
Yeah.
To drop.
Hey,
It's good to
Brian.
see you, Brian. Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah,
Give
love you
up.
guys. Speak to you soon. Bye.
Wow, I just realized this is the darkest it's been on on the hangout.
Getting mighty dark in here.
Getting
Right up the roof.
mighty dark and a little bit Jewish, and
That's pretty funny. Oh, dear.
yeah, Peach and I representing the Black Jew community.
We're the tomorrow people.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I this was years ago. I got in an argument with some bigoted asshole, and and I
No.
yeah, I know, right? And so when I said, well, I'm he was going on about me being black, and I was like, oh, but I'm all white too, and I'm all these other things, and I'm like, and guess what? As time goes on, more and more people are going to look like me, and fewer are going to look like you, and they're like, oh. We're all going to be this nice tawny color.
Yeah, well, I goofed. I had 2 white babies. Sorry.
It's still in there. Well, because it's funny. My a friend of mine, she had an older brother, and their I think in their case, their mother was black and their father was white. And Joanne, my friend, you couldn't really tell unless you look. If you stopped and looked at her and you looked at, you realized. But her brother was more obvious. And then like my step grandchildren, they're one parent is all European and the other one is Chinese. And the boy, he's you can see Asian features, but the older he gets, the less Asian you can tell. But his sister looks like 100% Chinese. So it's kind of interesting looking at the two of them. And
Genetics are weird.
and I love showing the pictures to people who are Asian, because they look at that and they're like, that looks like an Asian baby. I'm like, it is. That's my granddaughter. And they're like, oh, cool. And then they get very happy.
This kind of reminds me of something I saw on Twitter the other day. Someone wrote a tweet that simply said, name one thing Republicans are afraid of. And someone came back to them and said, white people being a minority.
Yeah.
And I actually think that hit the nail on the head more so than almost all the other replies I saw to that first original tweet. And my response to that, and I know I've said this on the streams before, but it bears repeating, that tacitly admits, doesn't it? If you have that fear of white people being a minority, you're basically tacitly admitting that you think it sucks to be a minority, right? And therefore, rather than adopt fascism, wouldn't it be better to create a society of equals where it does not suck to be a minority? That way, it wouldn't matter if you're in
Absolutely. And it also belies when they say that, oh, it's all equal already in a current, like, well, no, you yourself know that it's bullshit. And it's like
Right.
Chris Rock in one of his specials years ago, so was talking about, how much better it is to be white than black. He goes, there's a white
And I'm
one.
rich.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he says there's not a white person in this place that would trade with me, and I'm rich. He said he goes there's a white one-legged busboy in here, and he wouldn't switch with me, and I'm rich. He's gonna I'm gonna hold it, I'm gonna stretch it out, see if where this white thing takes me.
That's how good it is to be white.
Yeah.
Like and at the end, then he followed up. It's like when you're white, the sky is the limit. When you're black, the limit's the sky.
Right.
And that's what I tried to explain to Dark Matter. I've mentioned this before. How he didn't understand why anyone needed role models that were like them, that looked like them, or were similar to them in some way. And I said, well, for one, because you've had that. Now you're it's like palm olive. You're soaking in it. And then secondly, there's also the negative side of not only you're not seeing people that look like you make it, but you're also seeing people that look at you who try to get knocked down. So then that's basically they're seeing that limit, like, oh, like, should I even try? Because look at that guy and that girl, woman, and this person and that person, and they all got held back despite their best efforts. So that's why it's important. Again, all my heroes were not black growing up, but it was sure hell nice having a few.
Sure, I'll bet. Yeah. I mean, I think I get really annoyed when I hear people basically complaining about inclusiveness in, say, let's just take for the example of cinema. You've been getting this a lot for at least 10 years now.
Yeah.
And every time there's a female protagonist now, they go, oh, it's all about the woke brigade and all this kind of crap. And it really annoys me because they don't even realize the privileged point of view from which they speak. Basically they're complaining that their protagonists don't look like them.
Right.
You hear where I'm going with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the irony of it is just profound to me, and I just don't understand why they don't see it.
Yeah, we went from 80 to 90% of the protagonists looking like them to like 60 to 65, 70% looking like them, and that's enough to like lose their shit. Well, and it's the same thing going back for years. I remember even back in the 80s. This is why I laugh when they act like this is new. I remember in the 80s, it was a stage show of Madame Butterfly, and they cast a non-Asian actor in the lead role. And the Asian community was not happy about that. And of course, what was the answer? Oh, it shouldn't matter. It should just be the best person available, blah, 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 blah. But then now if sometimes the best person available happens to be, not white, that's traditionally this and traditionally that, blah, blah, blah. Like how many times people have suggested Idris Elba being
James Bond,
which would be fucking awesome. He's amazing. And it's like, oh, but it's a traditionally white character. I'm like, yeah, but there's nothing that says he has to be. And the thing is, like, well, traditionally, you go back far enough, all the characters were white, even the black ones.
Well, and like in Shakespeare plays, men played women. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, it's just that's been going on forever.
Exactly.
I think the conversation could swing a little bit too far, and my God, I do not want to sound like Bill Maher, but like, I do think that, like when Tom Hanks about a month or two ago said that he wouldn't do Philadelphia again and he should let a gay person play the part. I hear that and I don't hear that at the same time. I understand the sensitivity issue that he's referring to, but I also disagree insofar because if you take that logic to its extreme, that means a Jew could only play Jewish parts. Nobody who wasn't Jewish could play a Jewish part. What about trans actors and actresses, right? There's not very many parts written for them. So if they're going to play a part of a non-trans person, should that be not allowed because they're trans? I mean, I just think it goes a little. I think acting by definition means you're playing someone who's not you.
I think the representation really matters when it's integral to the character. So saying, well, would that mean that only Jewish people could play Jewish characters? Probably, but that doesn't mean that only Jewish actors would have to find Jewish characters to portray if it's not really part of the storyline.
Right.
Yeah,
I
I think
just
I think part of it too, to your point, Paul. And again, it's something that I kind of vacillate on a bit too. But for me, it comes down to um, part of the reason why it came up in the first place, right, was the fact that parts that should have could have gone to non-white actors were not going to non-white actors. So there was no opportunity. So that was what it really was. It
I
really,
absolutely agree
yeah,
with that.
yeah.
Little China, for example, had a white girl playing a Chinese girl for no particular reason whatsoever.
Exactly.
Right.
So it wasn't about cultural sensitivity so much. It was literally opportunity. Like you're not considering non-white actors because you're just so used to casting white people in every role,
Right.
even roles that shouldn't be white people, that you're not considering. You're not looking at anything else. But I think the other thing too, where I think what people miss this difference is okay. This character is usually a whatever, but I'm going to have somebody else play a different. So this was usually a white character. We're going to have a black person play it, or this was a Jewish character. I'm going to have a Christian play it, but they're going to play it as a Christian, as a non-Jew, right? But because I get with Pete's getting that too. There is, particularly with certain communities, like it. It's not that a non-Jewish actor couldn't do a good portrayal of Judaism, but it really depends on the context.
Yeah.
What's going on?
I mean, I suppose you'd have to have at least spent a lot of time around the culture in order to be able to emulate it properly.
Right. Because the other thing that is always a danger is playing a stereotype of that thing.
Right.
And I think, and especially here's what I would say. I don't think you should have to be gay to play a gay character. However, if the character is stereotypically gay, no, please don't just if you want, get Harvey Firestein to play that character because Harvey Firestein, that's who he is.
I love Harvey Firestein.
Pretty funny. No, but I mean, like, there hasn't. I mean, we all know. Say, for example, Rock Hudson was gay. Cary Grant was gay. The list is long, right? Of actors who played straight roles because that was the only thing they could play because that was the only kind of movies being written, right? In those days. And I'm not arguing, well, at least they managed to get acting jobs. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that I worry that the push might what's the word I'm looking for? Overcompensate, right? Because I just worry about a time when, like I say, you won't be able to play something that's not seen to be your.
Yeah, I mean, I get context really comes down to everything, now because I mean George Carlin played a gay character and he did a fairly good job again because he wasn't a stereotype. He was just a character who happened to be gay. It was part of his character, but it wasn't like. Basically, the romantic relationship that was going on, it didn't have to be a gay relationship. It could have been any relationship. It just happened to be a gay relationship. And he did fairly well. I think he I don't know if he got a nomination, but he definitely got accolades for playing the character.
If it's a trait that is integral to the story or to the character, then you should it would make sense to me that you would want to try to get a gay actor to play the part, or a trans actor, or a black actor, or Chinese, or whatever it is. If it's important to the script, to the story, to the character. If it isn't, if it's just like Joe said about George Carlin's role, if it's just
incidental,
happens to be, then it really doesn't kind of matter. But if it's something that's integral to the story, you end up you face possibly ending up with somebody who's going to play the role as a stereotype, or like a man dressed as a trans woman to play a trans character ends up just looking like a man in drag, and then it becomes just insulting to all trans people.
Right. One of the things I thought was kind of cool that Patrick Stewart had done, he had always dreamed of playing Othello. The main character of Othello, is black.
Right.
Now he had this idea way back when that would have been allowed, or would have been countenanced. But he realized, by the time the 80s, 90s came, that wouldn't be cool. So what this one theater troupe did, they heard about this. It was a black theater troupe. they rewrote Othello so that Othello was white and everybody else was black,
Yeah.
and reversed it. And it was very fairly powerful, because then now it puts white people in the position of having to understand what it's like to be, the outcast, to be the odd person out, and this way he got to play it without being, offensive, which was, I thought was pretty cool.
Okay, this is a good question. Kind of off topic, but not.
I loved it because, again, he wasn't like, he was a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude. So so that was the whole point, is that here he's supposed to be this great thespian actor, and so he's such a great thespian that he does these treatments to play a black person, but of course it's a horrible thing to do. But Robert Downey Jr. isn't playing a black character; he's playing a guy playing a black character.
Right.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty clever how it was like triple acting. You're an American actor playing an Australian actor playing a black American.
Right. I'm the dude that's playing the dude disguised as another dude.
I wish I could have been a fly on the wall when they handed him that fucking script the first day.
That and Iron Man.
You want me to do what?
No, yeah. Well, that and Iron Man were the two films that reinvigorated his career, because his career was nowhere up to that point.
Well, he had 3 careers, didn't he? He had a really good career as a young, sort of up and budding brat pack actor.
Less than zero.
Right. And then he went down the fucking cocaine alley, and then he went to jail for a while. Then he got out and he got rehabilitated. Then he had a second acting career, which lasted for like maybe 2 movies or 3. And then he got more rehab. And then he had the Marvel success and the Sherlock Holmes success, and it went on from there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, another movie that I like, again, it's funny. I hear a lot of people hate this movie, and they're all white. I haven't heard any. I mean, maybe Peach may hate it, but I haven't met any black people that actually hate this movie. Soul Man.
I have not seen that movie since about 1985.
Now, see, I love that
Thomas
movie.
Howell, isn't it?
See Thomas Howell, yeah, and I love that movie.
I don't see that as being offensive. I think often when people hold it up as an example, I think they're missing the mark.
Right.
It's just like, you didn't pay attention to the movie. You just saw a white guy in blackface.
Right. The character is the one that's being offensive, not the actor.
Right.
Because that's the whole point. Is he's using it's actually a great example of cultural appropriation. He doesn't understand why there's a scholarship set aside for black people. He just knows, I'm a rich, entitled dude. My parents are not gonna pony up all the cash for me to go to college. I'm gonna have to actually work for it. So, instead, I'm going to, do something pretty heinous, and I'm going to basically, appropriate, from black people and take their scholarship away. And of course, that's what's great, how he meets Radon Chung's character, because she's the one he stole the scholarship from. So here he is, he goes and starts experiencing life, as, essentially as a black person, and starts carrying all the racism and bigotry and all the different things. And also there is a certain amount of exoticism, again, which is also negative, or at least can be. Like the white girl who's so obsessed with dating a black guy because I don't think, maybe she thought she was civilizing him or something. And then how bigoted her parents are. And then the best part about the whole damn movie is at the end when James Earl Jones says to him, "Oh, so you've learned what it's like to be black." And he says, "No, sir, no, I didn't. Because if I didn't like it, I could stop." And then James Earl Jones is like, "Wow, I think you learned a lot more than I thought." And that's what, to me, that's the whole movie right there.
Yeah. I think movies like that, where you sort of have a trading places dynamic going on, where someone's being someone they're not, a lot of very interesting movies are like that. Some of them pretty funny, like Actually Trading Places or Freaky Friday, for example, is another one I'm thinking of. But has anybody here on the panel seen a movie that came out in 1985 and it's called Just One of the Guys?
Yes.
I love that movie. I thought it was
like
hilarious, but I'm not so sure if it would translate well into the modern world, because they don't necessarily I think the whole point was in that movie anyway, that you know, chicks weren't being taken seriously, and if you pretended to be a guy, they would take you seriously, and then that's a different issue than cross-dressing or anything like that, which I think some people might misunderstand nowadays because the sensitivity is so high.
Although I think that one still tracks though, because the point's still true, right? That women still
Sure.
have a rougher time getting taken seriously in our society. You know, you would think, you know, that a movie like that would hopefully move the needle, but here we are 35 years later,
Right.
you know, needle's still in pretty much the same fucking place.
Right.
You know. So yeah, I think again that one's another movie I love again for the same reason. I think that movie is very much in the vein of Soul Man, because again, it's not attacking black people. It's actually, in case of Soul Man, it's actually attacking white people.
Sure.
White Man's Burden.
Yeah, it's another one, and that one's gritty. That one's really dark and gritty.
Yeah, White Man's Burden. John Travolta. You familiar with that one?
Is that the one where it's a black majority culture and white people are? I never saw that. I was in England at the time, and it never went across the water.
Yeah, Harry Belafonte, I think, played the main villain.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, is that a good movie? I mean, I have no idea about it other than the premise.
I don't think I've ever seen the entire thing. I don't really. I remember the premise of it, but I don't really.
Well, and I love it too, because again, it was a play on this very kind of racist trope, right? That you know, if it not for the good administration of white people, you know, those silly black and brown people would, you know, couldn't survive. Which of course tracked also in India, right? That was the attitude the British had about the Desi people. Yeah, I didn't unfortunately see that whole movie. Rotten Tomatoes gives it like 1 star.
Oh wow!
And again, okay. Well, here's one thing. I remember in the show In Living Color.
What's that?
The TV show In Living Color.
Never.
You never got it over in UK?
No.
Okay, so it was the Wayans brother. Actually, it was the Wayans family, really, and some other people, and it was a great show. Now
Some
they
other
did.
people. Just
What?
you know, just a little character named Jim Carrey and Jamie Foxx.
Yeah. Just to cut some people, but it was a great show. But again, it caught hell again, mostly from white people, because there were like racial stereotypes, you know, black people. And again, the show wasn't glorifying the stereotypes; it was attacking the stereotypes. And so again, context is everything, right? Probably, I would say the only stereotype in it that I would think that could be offensive in that show was the Hadleys. They were a Jamaican family, and everyone in the family has like a million jobs, you know. And so you know, every time, you know, they're dealing with somebody, like how many jobs you got? You says, where someone's always like one job, like, you know, I'm the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, you know, blah blah blah, you know. And so like on the airline, he's the pilot, he's the pilot, the co-pilot, the flight engineer, the mechanic, and the you know. And I remember one of the ones, the baby lady's got a newborn baby, and he's like, oh, it's a cute baby. How many jobs he got? You're like, no job. He's a baby. They're like, no job.
That's pretty funny. Back in England, when I was a forklift driver, I used to work with this Jamaican forklift driver, and I could listen to him talk all day long. They got the weirdest twist on English that I've ever heard. The accent, I can't fake it to save my life, and I have tried. You know, it's they put these weird sort of they go all the way around like 360 degrees around every vowel. Do you know what I mean? It's hard to describe, but I love it. Yeah, it's interesting to me how many different English accents there are, just in England for that matter, but all around the world. You know.
Oh yeah. Well, it's the thing, because everywhere English goes, kind of takes over, but then the local language infiltrates back into English.
That's true too. Yeah.
You know, like somebody mentioned Gullah earlier, and that's unfortunately a language that's dying off. But you know, Gullah was a language because basically, and I forget the name of the island, but there's an island just off the coast of North Carolina, I believe it is, where that was like before enslaved people were like brought to the continent. They would stop there, they'd get washed down, the sick ones would get separated and all this, and then they would get sent off in different ships to go to different spots in the US. And so the language that cropped up was a pidgin English that was mixed with a whole bunch of different West African languages. And it's still spoken today, but the number of people who speak it's literally down, I think, to the dozens now. It's
wow,
really
so
on its way out.
Basically a dead language then.
Yeah, basically, and it's a real shame because it lasted for so long, and it was and it was one of those things where they could actually tell, like, oh, well, this comes from this, African language, this comes from that language, blah blah blah, and it was the way to have something that the people that were brought over could a way to communicate with one another, because of course they're from different cultures, they're from different, speaking different languages, and
they did that on purpose as well. They didn't like to put people who spoke the same languages together so they couldn't conspire.
Right. Well, and this goes to the thing of like when people ask why is it possible to have allowable to have black pride but not white pride? I'm like, well, because black people in America, at least, we are completely cut off from our cultural origin. We didn't choose to be black. We were made to be black. All that was stripped on purpose. Like you said, they mixed people from different tribes, different languages, so that we couldn't conspire with one another, that we couldn't cooperate with one another. And we weren't, and so whatever you weren't, Igbo, or you weren't Tutsi, you weren't, anything, you weren't Mandinka, you were black. So we basically ended up having to embrace it because that's all we have.
Sure.
Whereas white's not a culture, right? White people are Irish and German and Hungarian and Italian and myriad other cultures. Those are cultures.
As far as I'm concerned, the modern concept of whiteness is a post-World War II invention.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think even that might be going back a bit far. It might even be more recent than that. I mean, when I was growing up, hell, for that matter, you watch All in the Family. So we're talking about early 70s, and Archie is down on Italians, he's down on Arabs, he's down on Chinese people. Of course, he's down on black people. But other people who, Latino people, other people who someone from a visual point of view might think looks just as white as Archie Bunker, but because their last name is wrong, all it takes for Archie was your last name to be wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean? If your last name was Fuccetti or something, that you're not white, no matter what you look like.
There's always been tiers. I mean, so it's funny. The concept of whiteness isn't brand new, but it's always been a tool of a particular agenda. So you're right. So basically, like when the Irish came here, they weren't really treated as white, even though Irish people were pretty fucking white. And I remember even as a child, you're a little bit older than me, Paul, so you probably remember this. When people said race, they didn't just mean white, black, or or Asiatic. They meant, Italian was a race, and Hungarian was a race to a lot of people.
Well, I mean, I don't know, because for me, I've always been confused about this, and I have actually made this confusion known to some of my teachers when I was in school, because I had this exact problem, what you're just describing, because we were taught, and we were taught that there are three races, basically Mongoloid or East Asian, Negroid and Caucasian. Right. Those are what we taught were the three races. And I raised my hand straight away, and so it was like, well, how come Mexicans aren't considered white? That's what I said. And I was like 10 when I was being taught this, right? And my teacher explained that they really are, but they're not. It's a culture, the difference between cultural and scientific definitions and blah, blah, blah. Right, and right. I guess in 1973 or 4, that was probably accurate. Cultural definitions differ from scientific definitions, but I don't think that there's actually any scientific definition of race. So I think that was even a misnomer. Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's phenotypes and whatever, but I mean,
well, that's the thing. I mean, you look at Arab people, Arab people, they're technically Caucasian, mostly, but there's some other stuff in there, and it's like anything else. There's a a gradation. There's no hard lines, and it is very much a social construct. But like I said, whiteness has been used in weird ways. Like I said, about how poor whites were held back, but the way they keep them from revolting is the idea that, well, they're still above black people. Who was it? Was it Raven last night? Who was it? Was it you that said it about what LBJ said?
No.
Oh, well, basically LBJ was quoted as basically saying, the what's you gonna remember? It was basically the idea is that the poorest white man will feel better than the highest black man, and while you're picking his pocket,
Right.
And it's and it is really something that's kind of baked into our system, right? So whiteness is used selectively. So everyone's white when it's against black and brown people, but then you're something else when time comes for.
Well, I get really annoyed about. I mean, obviously, y'all know me, and as we've discussed in the past, I try really, really hard not to manifest any racism. Although, Joe, as we've discussed in the past, everybody has certain levels of subconscious racism they're not even aware of, right? But I try to be really aware as much as I can of that kind of thing. And what really annoys me about this whole thing is it's like we have allowed our ancestors, and we haven't fixed the mistake of calling people white, black, brown, yellow, whatever, because we're all different shades of brown. Every human being is a different shade of brown. You know what I mean? And to me, I mean, it shouldn't make it any more or less sensible, but it just you're really arguing about a few shades of color. And I've had white people, like hardcore race realist people, say, no, it's not just the color, it's the lips, it's the nose, it's the bliss, it's the intelligence. Oh my God, all that kind of crap. That's when you really know someone's racist, when they want to pin intelligence on
genetics, yeah,
or lack of, And I mean, it just blows my mind. But really, it is so stupid because you're talking about two frogs arguing over which one is greener. That's what it is. You know what I mean?
What was it? Do you remember Beetle Bailey?
Yeah.
I remember I was a kid, and I remember in Beetle Bailey, there was so one of the white majors asked the black major, like, why we call you're black and I'm white, but really you're brown and I'm like a shade of tawny pink, and like, why? I don't understand why that is. Yes, it's the problem is, of course, in America too. Like when you run into the so-called race realists, they love to ignore history. They love to ignore the context of how we got here.
Yeah.
They want to put everything down to genetics. Like, oh, well, black people don't do well because they're genetically inferior or culturally inferior. But like, instead of looking, well, if there's any deficits, how do we get here? Like, oh, wait. When you steal somebody from another continent and you bring them over here, you keep most of them, in bondage for 2.5, 3 centuries. And then once they're technically free, you basically treat them like they have no rights for another century and a half. And you literally steal their wealth from them. And every time they try to build up, you literally go and destroy it.
Right.
And somehow their descendants don't do that well. Imagine that.
Right. Yeah. This is something that's overlooked in general, I think. The really, really wealthy people in the world, I mean, wealth is generational. True wealth gets passed down. And that's something that, because of the system in America, well, it still pertains to be true, but it's also lots. I mean, America's great in one sense. I'll give you this. I mean, I don't know very many countries, if any other countries qualify, where, I mean, you can literally start with nothing and still make something of yourself in America. It happens. There's plenty of stories like that where people who are now fantastically rich were not born into that situation. Used to be, if you were fantastically rich, you were born into that situation. You know what I mean? That was just a given. So, I mean, you have to give America some props for, breaking that trend, but it's still, I personally believe you kind of have to have the permission of other rich people to get really rich. You know,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So Joe mentioned Caucasians before, and I just really wanted to point out that only people from the Caucasus Mountains are Caucasian, and also the Caucasus Mountains are in Eurasia. So
yeah, it's like Azerbaijan or something like that, isn't it? Around
and,
about there.
and Iran and southern Russia and Armenia. But yeah, I found the Lyndon Johnson quote. If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him someone to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you.
Wow.
And that's what we see in the right wing. You know, the MAGA hat people. That's literally what they are. They've basically been told that you're better. You know, because and again, this is one again. Bill, I hate invoking Bill Maher because he's an asshole, but. Well, one thing, you know, when he said back in 2016 that we lost because of identity politics, he was right, but for the wrong reasons. He wants to blame, you know, trans identity and stuff like that. The reality is it was all about blue collar, red state, white people feeling better about who they are. Trump gave them someone to look down on.
Yeah. Well, I'm, you know, cognizant of the fact that like something close to 70% of white Americans voted for Trump, and that's just, and therefore the Democrats would not have got into power was it not for the voting power of marginalized groups, you know, who thankfully stepped up and hopefully will do again in November. And let's segue to November because it's coming on fast. How y'all think it's going to go?
I'm feeling better about it now than I did 2 months ago.
Are we being lulled into a false sense of security, or is it just that all this Trump is in so much trouble that it helps you think that maybe the Republicans are going to suffer for that?
no,
It's still too early to tell. I think that's what it is.
I would say it doesn't look as good for Republicans as they thought it would because they overturned Roe.
Sure.
Women are registering to vote at record numbers across the country. They're seeing it state, you know, in every single state countrywide. So,
yeah. I was looking at a friend of mine, trans woman friend actually. She posted about the special elections that have happened in the last, you know, month and a half, and all of them went Democrat, including of the 5 districts that were there, 2 were purple districts and the other 3 were red, and the Democrats won all 5. By healthy margins, and these were districts that Trump won. One of them Trump won by 30 points.
Wow.
And the Democrat won by 9 points.
That's amazing. That's a hell of a swing.
Yeah. So and the other thing too, I'm looking at the Senate polls. Basically, unless Fetterman like shoots somebody on camera or Mark Kelly, you know, like commits suicide, they're winning. They're winning.
Right.
You know, they're way ahead. And for that matter, Warnock's pulling away from Herschel Walker because Herschel Walker's a moron.
Well, that's really reassuring, and it's terrifying to think that it was even close. You know what I mean? Yeah. Terrifying. Because if you're going to vote for Herschel Walker, you literally would vote for anyone.
Right. It doesn't look like there's any Democratic seats that are in the Senate are particularly in danger. And there may be 1 or 2 that are where the race will be tight, but again, there's also some where that looks that same way for the Republicans. So unless the Republicans have a great night, chances are if the Democrats lose a seat somewhere, they'll pick it up somewhere else. You know, so now the big question really is the House. Now again, if you asked me, hell, even 4 weeks ago, and you said, well, I'd be like, yeah, in all probability, the Democrats are going to lose the House, and that's going to fuck things up. I still think the odds are against the Democrats, but I don't think it's a fait accompli anymore.
What's the margin in the House right now? Is it like 11 seats or 18 seats?
3.
Or something like that? 3? I thought it was like around 10 or something.
No, that was in 2020. That was sorry. That was no, that was in 2018. Excuse me.
Okay, right.
I'm just gonna check just to make sure I'm right, but I know it was very tight.
Yeah, I know it's ridiculously close for the House, and then the Senate obviously is split, but. Political science in America, you know, because obviously only a third of the Senate seats come up for a vote every 2 years.
Right.
So it's always tricky because sometimes everybody that's coming up for a vote one particular year could be all Democrats, or you know, or whatever.
Okay, so here's where it is. So I was right and wrong. The Democrats have 220 seats. You need 217 as a push, 218 to lead. So they're 3 above push, but that's because there are 4 vacant seats. Republicans have 211. So it's tight. So the difference of 9.
Right. Okay.
But it's tight.
Right.
And I guess those 4, they're too close to the election to bother having a special election.
Right. Sure.
So I guess the question is, can the Democrats at least hold on to what they have? I don't know yet. Close enough that I'm actually thinking it's still in Republicans' favor for taking the House, but we'll see. However, given the 2, if I have a choice between holding the House and holding the Senate, I'll take the Senate.
Oh yeah, that's where the final hammer comes down. Yep. Yeah. Listen, friends, I kind of want to wind up the show because I want to do a little after show with you all as well. And I'm going to have to do my mom duties any minute now. She's going to be back at the door there looking at me like, when are you going to get off the computer? So in anticipation of that, I would like to thank everybody for hanging out with me today and everybody in the chat. It's been a pretty good-natured chat this time, and I always appreciate that, and I'm sure everybody does for that matter. So we'll be back doing this again next weekend, and I want to thank everybody for hanging out. Say goodbye, friends. Cheers. We'll see you next week on the Dinner Club.